Morning, everyone, and it's my privilege to moderate this session. And thank you for providing me this opportunity. Finance, when given the context of this uh, uh, conference and the panelist, it was upon me to decide that what topic we will take. After going through a lot of reiteration and using lot of the AI tools, I because that has become very important. And by the way, the one time we put our query on the Chat GPT, it cost Chat GPT 36 cent. So that has lot of cost involved in that, and it has also use a climate effect. Yeah. So after doing that, when we came across the expertise of everyone, I had to decide on a common topic and common theme. So we took upon a topic which is climate finance. And climate finance and mitigation policies that is currently we are experimenting with is a very important area, and it will have lot of repercussions. I come from a classical mainstream economics, which believes that state has a capacity and the state should not try to extend that. India has been very good at negotiating at the international fora and always pointing out that our obligations have to be limited by what we can do and how much we have polluted. Uh, and Dr. Roy has worked and written also about it in the open media about how the international organizations try to uh, try to force it upon the developing countries, and how the developing countries are trying to push back on that. So we will start with Dr. Roy on the macroeconomic challenges that is being faced about this climate finance.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here on a Saturday morning. Uh, it actually is. I don't have much to do normally on a Saturday morning anymore. Uh, so I think Amrendra mentioned macroeconomic challenges. Let me put it um, as simple a way as I can. I know that Indians love saying that we are unique. And actually, we are not really. In most cases. But in the case of climate, I'm afraid that India is a sui generis unique case, and therefore it follows that the case of climate finance too, we are a generous. Take this objectively, because you'll find lots of work where I've said India is not special. But in this case, India is special. I'll tell you why. One sentence. India is the first country that is expected to complete its development transformation without substantial recourse to fossil fuels. As simple as that. No other country in the world has been asked to do this. Not China, not Taiwan, not South Korea. They use fossil fuels to attain 5-digit levels of per capita income. And then, for better or worse, either they didn't expand or not. But the point is that their development transformation was substantially completed before they had to worry about how the energy of that transformation was being produced with consequent impacts on climate change. So at the macro level, there are diplomats here who are far more qualified than I. But I'll put it crudely, because again, this is another unique case in India. We're very argumentative, we disagree a lot. But on climate, there is a cross-partisan consensus, which is quite amazing. By increasing the productivity, effectiveness, and efficiency of my energy system, I become an advanced country. I'm able to find the energy resources more efficiently and more productively to finance my development transformation, to enable my development transformation. Now, are you going to finance that? The only problem here is, unlike development finance, nobody cared if we were a poor country. With climate finance, they cared, because if India does not reduce its carbon emissions by 2070, even to the levels we have said, you can forget your 1.5, 2.5. So as Professor James Scott recently said, climate for us is a weapon of the weak. And therefore, the major macroeconomic problem lies in getting private finance into this country at cheaper prices than it is coming now because of institutional barriers. That is reason. Reason two in climate. So I've given you the half reason, which is internal, and we can discuss that. Reason two in climate, and I think this is very important, is that I have to sell climate finance politically. Tell me, what is the biggest climate issue in India that sells? It's not net zero. What is it? Who's from Delhi? Who's from Patna? Pollution. Have you seen a single climate proposal that deals with things like my rivers, my situation in agriculture, with pollution, in footlights promoted by someone who is not from India? You have an administrative barrier to getting cheap finance at scale in the one country which is both able to absorb it and do something with it to give you global results. And you have an unwillingness to discuss climate in the context of the development problems related to climate and the environment that this country faces, because your discourse is entirely couched in terms of the net zero paradigm. And that is not going to work, either politically or in terms of getting shelf-ready projects and plans that can be used to deploy climate finance, yes, to get net zero as a side effect, but also to solve the problems that emanate in this country from the development transformation causing environmental and other problems. So for me, that is the macroeconomic background in which we have to assess climate finance. The public policy potential in conclusion for doing this, because you have to constantly think differently from the herd in London, the herd in New York, the herd in Tokyo, about your country's climate finance. There's a market for it because you're too big to ignore and too big for the world to fail. So take this macroeconomic lens of climate finance and use it to reset the terms of the debate, and then we will save both the earth and develop our country. The two now are not separable. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to Dr. Ratan Roy. He's made it very easy for me to segue from the macroeconomic context into the issues that Amrinder Pandey wanted me to talk about. When Ratan says that India needs to think differently from the white man's herd, which is sitting somewhere else, a Mark Carney or Bill Gates or something, this is something that is already understood in government in India. And if anyone tracks how policy has been molded over the years, just go and see what our stance has been over the years. It's a very, very sage kind of balanced stance. Everyone knows the problem. I think Amrinder Pandey and Ratan Roy have mentioned it. Public finances are stretched. Ideally, we would like to address all these issues through public money. And when we talk of private finance, by and large, like Ratan had said, we are talking about the long-term funds that are coming from abroad, the pension funds, the insurance funds, the endowment funds. All these are funds in a West which is rapidly aging, where they do not have enough returns. I always tell people, money is not a problem for projects in India. I come from the infrastructure world. Show me a good project, I'll show you the money. Our problem is in project preparation. Climate finance, which is basically something that is intrinsically opposed to infrastructure development, because anything you do in infrastructure hurts the environment. And you can take, like, I always say I'm like dogmatics in the Asterix comics, even one leaf of a tree, it hurts me when I see that. Adaptation and resilience are very difficult to deal with in infrastructure in general, and also in particular in things like manufacturing industries in India. And I'm going to combine infrastructure and manufacturing when I tell you this. Why is it a nightmare? Because even in taxonomies across the world, we have about 35 to 40 taxonomies on climate across the world. There is no agreement between how adaptation activities are defined. What could be considered adaptation in one taxonomy is not considered adaptation in another. So one of the advantages India has, Ratan was pointing out the disadvantage of being at a stage where we are being asked to change without the advantage of having fossil fuels, etc. But one of the things of joining in rather late on the learning curve is we can learn from the mistakes of others. In climate, when you look at the risks, and that is where the investment is going to come in, climate is a very dicey subject to deal with. Climate events are non-linear. They're erratic. And they are famously very geographical, local, event-based. How do you draw trends which you need for risk analysis? And some of you have already taken a couple of risk analysis courses. In risk analysis, you calculate probability. How on earth do you calculate probability in a subject which is so new that you don't know what's happening? You don't have enough data points. So one of the things that we need, and India, we need this as a specialization, is to hone the skills of climate finance trained investment specialists, even those in public policy. These are areas that you need to get in. Two, Dr. Amarendra Pandey had spoken of the use of AI. AI is one of the tools we need for collecting data and then translating it. Collect data points, because everything in AI is based on numbers, it's based on examples, and then you draw trends. There's a very famous example in infrastructure about, I don't know how many of you were old enough to know this, but about 10, 15 years ago, there was a huge, maybe Akbar was posted there that time. The problem with climate strategies and climate projects, climate adaptation and resilience projects, is no one knows when the ROI is going to come in. Everyone, and those of you who are in public policy should be available, there's something called the levelized cost, LCOE, that is used for comparing power projects. Please remember, this is a lousy comparator. The reason is, in thermal projects, the investment that is made, which is for capital, etc., before the production starts, is 40 to 50% of the levelized cost, that is over the lifetime. In something like solar, investment is front-ended. 90% of the investment is when the project is set up. After that, operations is hardly anything. For wind, except for offshore, it's about 80%. Recovery of this takes well over about 20 years normally. If it's a very good project, you get it in about 10 years. But that's also, it's patient. You need to be patient. How do you address this? Where public finance, philanthropy can come in, and the grants, etc., that Ratin was talking about, is we need to set up a credit enhancement fund, a guarantee. These are the things that de-risk the investment that outsiders can get in. We had announced this credit fund in 2015, I think, in the budget. Everything is ready. It needs to get off the ground. I'm not sure why it's not getting off the ground. The other things that we need to draw in is the experience. I'm going to tell me if I'm running out of time. Yeah, I'm running out of time. Okay, I'll conclude it. The other thing that we need to draw in is these things cannot be done in silos. No climate project is done in a silo. It has externalities. So when we are talking to the private sector, draw them in discussions. This is increasingly being done across government in India, and I think state governments are also doing it. There are some red flags, maybe we'll come across this in the Q&A.
Thank you, ma'am. I think with the context both Ratin sir and you have said, it's, I think 5 minutes is more than enough for me because you guys have touched upon. But today I'll move to a little bit of different structure in way I would like to share my thoughts away is not on the subject, but what public policy can do, and specifically the public policy scholars here there. I started my career as a public policy professional around 14 years before. I don't have a legal degree or a policy degree. So what I have learned of this is learned on the ground working with policy makers, policy influencers, academia, think tanks, consumer groups. How do you leverage that unique position to basically become a producer and rather than a consumer? That needs changes from a policy lens, that needs changes from a social lens, that needs technological advancements, that needs maybe also a change in the community, the way we see things from a circular economy and other perspectives. So that, first of all, brings us to a very unique position. But if you actually look at the way the government has defined the AI mission, which was launched earlier this year, is a perfect combination of picking up each and every pillar. I'll just divide it. It's leave apart the capital outlay, which is around 10,000 crores something. That is required at this moment of time. It has a component of infrastructure, which is the core basic compute infra that is needed for your own core, and you're not dependent on others' compute infra, which is also data sovereignty aspect comes as part of it. The second aspect is the financing part. That is a core component. The third aspect is skilling part. Skilling is not only creating a workforce, but also how to adapt it within the government ecosystem to use AI more effectively. They have a part on startups, specifically focused on how do you leverage the startups coming up over here. So if you look at those factors, all those factors have been identified to kind of create up an entire ecosystem of AI. And that's why if you see either India being the chair of GPI this year, and we leading it next year also, as the So everywhere, there's a unique proposition that is getting developed. Even in a small location to a bigger metro, AI is the hot topic, not only from a employment perspective and all, but from an application development perspective. We are seeing how government is pushing that AI should be used for social goods. So from a healthcare to a disaster management, all those aspects, there are innovations that are happening. And there's actually government spending money on innovations and R&D on these places, both from a public and private finance perspective as a combination of both. So that's the third pillar. Review and assessment is the aspect of checking yourself whether you're, after 5 years down the line, where are you? Does it needs any moderation in your strategy? And then accordingly change the changes that needs to happen. And then taking the success stories global. When you make it for India, it's successful, take it to the globe. I think DPI is the excellent story which we always talk about, and now it is moving beyond digital payments. It's moving to healthcare, education, social infrastructure, all those aspects. So that is the kind of a 5-step process from a public policy perspective we should look at it. I think I'll just share some quick thoughts from a regulatory intervention perspective which needs to be thought around.
So thank you very much for on the diverse thoughts, but one consensus which is emerging is that there is scarcity, and currently India is facing a lot of problems in terms of getting the money from outside. Like ma'am has rightly pointed out, there is money outside, but we do not are able to bring it inside the country. Secondly, we also see that we are talking about net zeros, but also the new thermal power plants are coming up. That's the reality. More and more thermal plants have started coming up. NTPC has started putting more money on that. So that's the growth imperatives that we see.